Okay, this is the Unit 5, Lesson 3, Day 2 homework, question number 5. And I've done some pre-work for it here before the videos, but the idea behind this is that we're exploring the ratios that are presented in task number 4. And so task number 4 gives us an income equation, an expense equation, a number of tickets N equation, and a P of X equation that combines the two. And so what I did is I started that project and said, well, P of X would simply be income minus cost. So I have a P of X expression that I have simplified here that I end up using in 2 locations on number 5. But number 5 is found on page 382 in the text, and we're asked to simplify each of the tasks from part 4, which is looking at these and rewriting them in simplified form, and then to state whether the domain is the same as the original or if it's been altered. So it's pretty much the same idea as question number 3, only with now we have different expressions, ones that involve x squareds now it looks like in most of them, so or parabolic pieces in most of them. So what we're going to do is take a look at the first one here, and right away I see that I have a 25x squared on the top and on the bottom. However, that's not a factor I can pull out necessarily, but we'll keep looking. There's a 700x and a 500x and a 500 and a 7,500. One thing I might begin doing is I realize that 25 can go to every one of these expressions. So I'm going to go ahead and factor out a 25, and I might even factor out a negative 25 just to do something a little bit different this time. So I'm going to factor out a negative 25 from the top. That's going to make a positive x squared, but it's going to make the second part negative. We also want to see if 25 can come out of 700, so let's check. Does 700 divided by 25 work out for us? Sure does. It's 28. So we have x squared minus 28x. And we got to see how many times 25 goes into 500. So we'll do 500 divided by 25. That's 20. And so we'll take a look at that. Positive 20. Well, wait a minute. I pulled out a negative sign, so this should be a negative 20 as well. So that's that expression on the top. And we'll do the same things on the bottom. I'm going to pull out a negative 25, which will leave a positive x squared, but it's going to make the second one negative 20x, and then the 7,500 is going to be a negative 300 in that expression. So right away I can see that the negative 25s are gone. What I want to look at next is, can I factor x squared minus 28x minus 20, or factor x squared minus 20x minus 300 in a way that becomes quadratic with integers? And so I might try some things. I might say, well, negative 20 is a list of things. It could be a negative 1 and a positive 20, and there we see the difference is going to be 19. Or the other way around, I could do negative 20 and positive 1, but the biggest difference I get between those two is going to be a negative 19, not negative 28. And there's certainly no way to make that sum greater. That is the biggest sum we'll get. So I can't factor the top any further. In the bottom, I look for things that multiply to 300 that perhaps were to add together to be 20. But again, I'm not seeing anything here that is going to cause this, the denominator to be factored out to factor out anything in the numerator, because, well, the numerator couldn't be factored out. So that means I wouldn't cross anything off here. So I'm only crossing off the 25s, and in doing so, I have not changed the expression any with the x's, so I have not changed any of the denominator issues. So we'll say no change in the denominator, or no change in domain, because the domain is mostly affected here by just the denominator piece. However, if the numerator would have the same 0, then that affects the numerator and denominator and changes the domain ideas that you can't divide with 0. Still fits. So no change in domain for the first one. Let's take a look at the second one. Now we're dealing with a quadratic and a linear term. And again, I'm seeing the 7,200, 25, 500, 7,500. They all have 25s in them. So we're going to go ahead and factor the 25 out again. This time I want to know how many times 25 goes into 7,000. I'm going to say it goes in 280 times. The reason I know that is 25 went to 728 times. 7,000 would just be 280. It goes into 200 a total of 8 times. 4 times 4, 100, so we double that. And then in the bottom part here, we're going to pull out 25. And I think I'm going to pull out just the positive 25 this time. Okay, and in doing so, this is a negative x squared. This will be a positive, going to 500 is going to equal 20 times, remember correctly, let's just double check that. Yep, 20 times. And then into 7,500 is 300 times. So this time I factored it out with the positive pieces instead of the negatives. Works out. 25 is gone. And from here I'm able to see, well, I have a positive 8 and a positive 280. I know both those should be divided by 2. However, there's no 2 in this bottom expression. So I'm not seeing that this is going to factor out any further either. So this is no domain change. Okay. Then we're moving on to the next piece here with negative 25x squared plus 700x plus 500 over 750 minus 25x. Again, I get those 25s, so we're going to factor those out. I'm going to factor out a negative 25 in this case. Factor out a negative 25, I get a positive x squared. I will get a negative 28, and I will get a negative 20, just like we saw in the first part 1. And then I'll pull negative 25 out of the bottom, and 25 goes into 750 30 times, so this will become the 30, and then we'll put plus x inside here, okay? And then we'll cross off the negative 25s, and this is what we're left with, okay? Well, this expression that we're left with, if I could factor the top and factor the bottom, they had a common factor, we can cancel those out. However, we already know we can't factor the top of the integers, so this is not change the expression, we have no change in the domain as well. Kind of redundant, right? All right, and then in the last expression, we have 7,000 minus 200x over 750 minus 25x. Again, let's pull out that 25. Let's pull out negative 25 since the bottom is negative. So we pull out negative 25. 25 will go into 7,000 into 300 times here. No, 280 times, excuse me, 280 times. So we'll go in 280 times. Since I pull out a negative 25, though, I need to make that negative as well. And then I'm going to pull out negative 25 from a negative 200. That's going to leave me with the 8x. So it looks almost like what I did in part 2, but this time I factored out a negative 25 instead. So it changes the signs. And then on the bottom, I pull out a negative 25. I will have left a negative 30, and then I'll have a plus x here. Okay, whoops, I didn't put the negative 30 in the previous one either. The negative 30 should belong here. Just double check your answer now. That's negative 30 plus x in part 3. So make sure you fix that. And then this expression, negative 25 times a negative 30 plus x. So right here, I'm able to cross off 25s. And then I'm looking, yep, there's no other values I can cross off. So there's going to be no change in domain here either. All right, and that ends question number 5.